Hello, my name's Tamsin Loveday. I'm an artist and I make art by any means necessary. I particularly enjoy making books, and today I'd like to invite you to come for a visit to our garden and to see how I'm going to turn that experience into a little artist's book. So here I am in the garden. It's a winter garden, very wintry. It's the 8th of February and it's snowing and the sun's out. And I've come on a little safari just to explore my winter garden, see what treasures can be found. We don't have a fancy garden. We don't have any gardeners or anyone to help us look after it. But it is a little oasis for us and for all the wildlife. And this is a magical time of year when you think everything's asleep and we're pretty fed up with the dark. But things are starting to come back to life and the sap is rising. There are a few little treasures out here. Look at that, still with berries on it. Beautiful. We deliberately keep the garden a little bit wild. And what I love about it and what interests me as an artist is the layers and the juxtaposition you get. The foliage and the twigs. And you know, the wonderful thing is that nature just keeps on giving. These are seed heads from what I think is a hibiscus shrub. Just still hanging on in there, adding some interest this time of year. And here's some perennial honesty. I love the lozenge shape of these little lanterns, or half lanterns they are now. And so what I'm going to do is take this little safari back into my workroom and show you how I'm going to turn it into a book. That's better. Back indoors now. I've got a cuppa. So what I'm going to do now, in my head I've got all the impressions of being in the garden and the treasures we found there, and I'm going to get some paint out and try to capture the feeling, what it felt like being in the winter garden. So here we are. I've got some sheets of Bockingford watercolor paper because it's got a lovely texture, just soft texture that's created by the woolen blankets that it's pressed against in its production. Comes from a paper mill in Somerset, and I've mixed up some pretty cheap acrylic paint. I'm a firm believer in using what you've got to hand, and I've got these. But because they're quite plastically and shiny, I've mixed them in with some matte medium, and that just takes the density of the pigment down a little bit, but also means it's not quite so shiny and sticky when it's done. And what I've got is I've got a paintbrush for each colour. This is a bit of a printmakery thing, keeping things just separate and clean. And I've got a brayer or a roller, but this one's pretty messed up and I keep it for painting particularly. And the idea isn't to paint a picture of the garden. And what I'm wanting to do is just get some marks down, you know, on the paper, and just be building up textures, layers of texture and colour. And what I might do is put some heavyish paint on and then get the roller over it. You can see that just picks paint up and moves it around. Put a blob on there. You can see what I mean. So this is absolutely about play. It's about tapping to the feelings of being in that garden, the cold, and the textures of the foliage, the noises, the smells. Just being in that moment again, whilst being in the moment with paint roller. You do have to watch out for transferring little bits of this and that. Just take that out of the way. Unless, of course, you want that. I'm a firm believer in happy accidents. So I just keep going, adding layers and colours until something interesting starts to happen and appear on the page. I really like what's going on here with the edge of the sprayers just pulling paint off again, so what you can see underneath is that the brighter green underneath the other layers. That's quite fun, isn't it? The beauty of this is you can't get it wrong. You can't get it wrong. It's just testing things out, giving it a go. Just enjoying being with the paint and your kind of feelings of having been in the garden. You might be quite surprised at what starts to happen. Now, there are other ways, obviously, of collating impressions of a visit to the garden. You could sketch while you're in the garden if it wasn't so cold as it was today. You could take rubbings of textures you find in the garden directly onto your paper. You could take photographs and collate those digitally into a document, a big photo document, and then print that out on a large format, like an A3. You have to get hold of an A3 printer. Now, I think that needs a little bit more dark green. So, like I said before, it's not about painting a picture of the garden. It's about creating layers of texture and marks and colour that kind of evoke and bring to mind the layers of foliage and twigs and sound and smell, everything you can find in the garden and what you remember from being there. This is a really neat thing, again, so a bit like with the brayer, taking off underneath the paint and actually scratching through. and then actually using the end of the brush just to scrape that back on again. You never know. So I'm going to stop with that there and let it dry. So here we are. It's pretty dry now, and you might notice I couldn't help twiddling, so I felt I needed some representation of the snow. So pretty obviously I've got a white paintbrush and dotted that over quite very informally, and I was thinking it was just a little bit flat, so I got the ochre colour and added a little bit of that. And so I'm just going to bring it up to the camera so you can have a look at some of those textures and marks, and the veil-like quality of adding those layers. Now we're going to go on and show you how I'm going to turn this flat piece of paper into a three-dimensional structure, into a folded book form. So here we are. I've got one of the pieces of watercolour paper here with its impressions of the garden on, and this piece here that I folded up into being a book is the piece we did first with the white on. And you can see it folds up into a three-dimensional book form. So I'm going to show you how we do that. You start off by folding it in half. Now I'm using my sense of touch as well as my eyes to see that it's all lined up beautifully, because that's quite important. It needs to be accurately folded. And if you're someone that doesn't have use of their hands, you can ask your helper or direct someone to help you do this part of making your book. Then we fold that way. I'm using a bone folder here. This is one's made of Teflon. It just helps to get a really good crease. But if you don't have a bone folder, you could use a ruler or a credit card, or the handles of the scissors work quite well too. And we're going to fold it in half the other way. And you'll see when we open it out, it's divided into 8 sections in fact. And what we're going to do is cut this centre line here. You can use scissors, there's a knack for doing that, but I'm going to use a ruler and a scalpel. That will allow us to get a much more accurate cut. Now when you're using a blade, keep your fingers out of the way and let that blade do the work. Don't feel you have to push through the paper all in one go. So I'm going to make 3 passes at it. Because it's a nice pointy blade, I can see exactly where I'm cutting from and to, so it's just exactly where we need to be. And then you can see that's made a slot. And I'm going to just orientate the folds, or reorientate the folds. Now sometimes when I make these books I paint both sides of the paper if I think it's going to be seen. There we are. So that's the magic bit. It's kind of a pinch and flip manoeuvre. And then you can decide which page of your book is going to be the cover. So that's rather groovy, that one, isn't it? So I'm just going to use the bone folder to reinforce the folds, and that helps the flat piece of paper learn that it's now a book and it's a three-dimensional object. And sometimes it's a question of just, there we go, that's the one that wants to be the cover. Pretty, isn't it? I just can never get over the magic of creating a really abstract, open painting piece of work. And when you edit it down, it just becomes something completely different. So that's how you turn it into a lovely book. Now what you can do, this will obviously need some trimming. You can glue the white pieces together at this point. You glue these pages and then you glue those pages together, but we're not going to do that today. What we are going to do is this is today's winter garden book. I love it, look at that. We are going to add some little watercolor and biro drawings I've made of some of the treasures we found in the garden. Those are those honesty seed pods, and that's the seeds of that hibiscus shrub, and hopefully it's obvious that that's those amazing holly berries. So I'm going to look through my pages and just think about what fits where. I really like the snowdrops here, so I'm going to get myself some stick glue. You could use any adhesive really. I quite like stick glue for this kind of thing. There we go. So I've made these little watercolour drawings on newsprint actually. It's fantastic paper for doing collage with because it's quite resilient in actual fact. Takes a drawing really, really well, but it's quite thin when you stick it in. And then we've got two other interior pages. I think I'm going to put the holly on here. I'm going to put it on that page. I might be about to change my mind. It's an artist's prerogative. I'm going to put the seed pods there. Now, you know I mentioned the matte medium earlier on that I mixed with the paint. You could use matte medium to put these things in. And sometimes people will use matte medium over the top of a collaged element to seal it in. Very nice. And do we want hibiscus seeds or holly? We're really saving the holly for the front, I think. So hibiscus seeds it is. I've managed to tear my drawing, but it doesn't matter. We'll deal with that in a sec. Line it up, pop it on. So I hope by now you're already thinking about how you can visit a place and visit a garden, and what kind of book you'd like to make. So here we are. Here's our little artist book called A Winter Garden. I'll just show you each page. I hope you've enjoyed the visit to our garden and learning how to make a little folded book.